Saskatoon Police Service has launched a new initiative, the Drop Gangs program, and I've invited the Superintendent of Criminal Investigations, Patrick Nogier, to join us. Superintendent, thanks for taking some time out of your day to help us with this.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate the invitation and look forward to the discussion.
I want to talk a little bit about yourself and your role in policing, how you got involved, and to move along the ranks as you have, and now lead this new initiative that's coming forward. How did you start, and what drew you to policing?
It's funny. We were just talking the other day with a couple of comrades from work, but it's hard to believe that I'm already getting close to 3 decades in this industry, and you wonder where the time flies. I clearly distinctly remember when I first got here as a constable that a lot of the other individuals that have been here for 25, 30 years, they indicated that I better enjoy the ride because it goes by quick. And I really didn't realize that until about 3 years ago when getting close to 30 years of employment in law enforcement, and it certainly does go by quick. But I've been very, very fortunate to have the opportunity to work for an organization that has lots of opportunity, different areas that you can go and work in. I've been very fortunate to work with some great mentors, people that have provided a roadmap to get to where I am today. And more importantly, it's the kind of people that I work with on a day-to-day basis. And it never ceases to amaze me, the amount of dedication and effort that goes into trying to make our community safe. As you mentioned, I'm currently the superintendent that's in charge of the Criminal Investigations Division, commonly known as the plainclothes section of the organization. We have some of our more intense investigative units, major crime section, the forensic identification section, guns and gang section. A lot of our drug units are involved. We've got sex crimes, the child center. There's just a lot of going on in this area, and unfortunately, it seems to be a bit of a thriving industry when it comes to a need to provide a service to the community to continue to keep it safe.
I think that's one of the most intriguing things that we as citizens look to the leadership of the police service and the different programs. As criminals and criminality changes and evolves, so does policing. Talk a little bit about the Drop Gangs initiative and how did that come to be?
Well, it's one of those initiatives that we've undertaken that really there's only a certain, and I want to say, once again, I can tell you this from experience, there's only a certain amount of time that policing is very reactive in nature. And when you look to adopt programs that are proactive in nature that can somehow intervene into a cycle or pattern that's causing community issues, that's when you really have to evaluate them and, more importantly, implement them to try and have a more proactive approach rather than continually reacting to crime. The Drop Gangs initiative was one that met that criteria. And that was, once again, this wasn't a top-down pushed type of initiative. This comes as a result of dedication on behalf of individuals that are currently assigned to our criminal intelligence unit. They latched on to the idea. We were kind of following a roadmap that was provided out of the province of British Columbia with their CFSEU, which is a combined force unit that looks after specific types of gang-related activity for the province of British Columbia. And we noticed quite quickly that there was a lot of similarities to Saskatchewan into what they were experiencing in BC. And that's why we thought that adopting this practice and then managing it to make it something more local might have a really positive impact on our community. So that's when we kind of took a really hard look at it. We started making some minor adjustments, started asking some questions about our community partners and whether they'd be willing to participate, and ended up with what you see today is the start of the Drop Gangs initiative for the Saskatoon Police Service.
It's very interesting to see what you're trying to measure, and I don't know how you would know that you've accomplished what you've set out to do. Is there a way that you can kind of gauge getting the intel from the frontline officers and people that you talk to on a daily basis that you've met the goals set out by this program?
Well, you bring up some really good points, and just from a business standpoint, I think every organization, you'd be negligent if you didn't have some type of metrics based in to try and determine whether or not you're actually having an impact. So one thing that we've looked at doing is it's fine to have an initiative that's up and running, but more importantly, and to your point, is what do you do to ensure that the things that you're doing are indeed doing what you think they will? So one thing that we're looking at is, the easy things is whether or not the website in itself is getting any type of involvement from the community. Are people accessing it? Are they clicking on certain links that can provide them with information? And this leads into a whole nother discussion about what the website's intent is and what it means to do. The groups that are on the website that we're drawing reference to, those are the experts in changing attitudes and opinions and behaviors of individuals that might be involved in criminal activity. Police, we do what we can to hold people accountable when they don't follow the rules. But when it comes to actually changing people and changing behaviors, there's people and there's organizations in our community that are much better suited for it than we are. So the website really just tries to direct them. It's the conduit to make that connection between people that really want to change a pattern of behavior and maybe adopt a new lifestyle, and those that are really having difficulty too. Because it's not, quite frankly, we're not going to convince people to get out of a gang. We're not going to force people to get out of a gang. We're not going to intimidate people to get out of gangs. There's more organizations out there that are well better suited to have those really confidential, influential discussions with them and change patterns of belief and behavior.
I think one of the most intriguing parts of the initiative is the funding of it. There's the civil forfeiture process. How does that work? Where does it start? And how do you access the funding for that? Because it doesn't sound like it's coming through taxpayer dollars per se.
You're right. And once again, I think that's a really important point that we need to acknowledge is sometimes we are heavily invested in responding to crime. And a lot of the money that comes through a budgetary process is for that very purpose. And it does cost a lot to be reactive in nature, but sometimes you don't have the latitude or the ability to really adopt a proactive stance. And that's one thing that civil forfeiture on the province of Saskatchewan, that's one thing that they've provided. They provided an avenue that any law enforcement agency can make an application for civil forfeiture funds. And the one thing that people should really understand is that when police go out and hold people accountable for criminal activity and seize assets as a result of that criminal activity, we're not seizing those assets and converting it into money that go directly into our accounts. That goes to a third-party independent provincial unit that is then responsible for the management and distribution, if there is any distribution, of those funds for specific reasons. And what I can tell you with my interaction from civil forfeiture is that they're very astute at making sure that there's certain requirements that have to be met before you can make an application to receive funds. It has to meet specific goals and objectives that the province has identified with respect to reducing criminality in our communities. And it's not a guaranteed thing. So for us to go for that request and that ask, we have to make sure that it makes sense, that there's a business approach to it, that there's a results mechanism built into it, and that we continue to reevaluate to ensure that the money's being used for the best purpose.
I'd have to imagine that, some years down the road, we'll be able to look back at this and say that, there have been fewer organized crime types of activities or break-and-enters and stolen vehicles, things of that nature. What would you say, just looking through the website earlier, that, there's different types of gangs and across Canada, some of them highly organized, some not so much. What would you say to the general public who looks at this and says, well, how is that going to work? What different types of gangs would you think would be affected by this program that you'd see success with?
Well, predominantly, we're dealing with two different gangs. We got outlaw motorcycle groups that are working within the community, and we also have street gangs. And when you look at the impact that street gangs are having in our communities, they tend to be the more violent, they tend to be the more difficult because they're very transient in nature to keep tabs on, and they require a dedicated resource to ensure that we know who's responsible for what gangs do they belong to, what activity they might be involved with, and then try and hold those individuals accountable. So this aim of the Drop Gangs initiative, although there's two specific groups, one being outlaw motorcycle gangs and street gangs, I think we're hoping to have the biggest impact in the street gang activity. I think that if you looked at it, street gangs will have more of a youth involvement to it. And the sooner that we can connect with youth and get youth into the hands of resources that can have an impact, I think the better off we'll be in changing patterns so that we're not dealing with individuals for 10, 15 years, where that might be the case in a more well-established outlaw motorcycle gang.
I really appreciate the effort by the Saskatoon Police Service to try something new and commend you and the department, your teams there, that all the hard work that goes into something like this as something that can maybe divert a lot of the street level activity that we're seeing here. So congratulations to you for doing that. If people did want to find out more about this, where would you advise us to go?
Well, two things. First and foremost, the vehicle that we're using is a traveling billboard. So if you see that vehicle out and about, you can be assured that it's your local police service that's doing what they can to intervene. There's information on the vehicle in itself. I would encourage you to visit the www.dropgangs.com website for more information. And also you can go to the Saskatoon Police Service website and there's links there.
Superintendent Patrick Nogier, the Criminal Investigations Unit, thank you for this, and best of luck with this program.
Thank you very much.
That's our show for today. I'd like to thank our guests, Scott Banda from Federated Cooperatives Limited, as well as the Superintendent for Criminal Investigations, Patrick Nogier. I'm your host, Randy Shabila. We'll see you next time on Connect.